Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Wills, and welcome to the video. This is part 3 in my series exposing my personal experiences with the organisation Sanctuary Housing, who Channel 4 in a documentary aired under the Dispatches umbrella in, I believe, April 2029, described Sanctuary as the new landlords from hell, and I fully believe that that is a 100% accurate description of these charlatans. So this video will probably be much longer than the half hour or so of the first two videos, and because it's this is very, very serious, tragic story, and it will be entitled, in the description, Sanctuary Housing Have Blood on Their Hands. So it begins again, say this is my own personal experience. Dates and times are a rough estimate. This goes back over 17 years, and obviously I didn't keep a record because 17 years ago I didn't think I needed to have to keep a record of everything that went on. So I moved in May in 2008 into a flat at Sanctuary Housing at Charlton House, Eastcliff Road in Dawlish. Now, in my block of flats, there are 4 floors of flats. Each floor contains 4 flats. So obviously, the ground floor, flats 1 to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, where I am, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then the top 13, 14, 15, 16. A combination, I believe, of 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom flats. So when I moved in, there was, although I never met them, I did hear them a lot, because when you live in a block of flats, noise travels. It's impossible to be quiet. You're going to get noise from neighbours in blocks of flats. That's a given. That's accepted, and I fully accept that. The neighbours in the flat above mine were quite noisy, but nothing to make complaints about. As I say, it's just the situation how it is. They were, by all accounts, a young couple of men, a gay couple. I have no issues, of course, for being gay. I mean, for goodness sake, I'm a trans woman myself, so I know the prejudices, the discrimination that can happen when you're trans, you're gay, or you're, let's say, different from the norm, as many people might say. So that was not an issue. At some point, I'm going to estimate, my first of many estimations in this video, the gay couple moved out. I never actually met them. I don't believe I ever saw them. As I say, I only heard them. I'm going to say within 18 months of me coming in. So we're talking around about the second half of 2009, first half of 2010, around that period. And it's a 1 bedroom flat. It's exactly the same layout as my flat, and a single lady moved into the flat. Now, in this video, it's important that, with one exception, I am changing the names. So this is, to the best of my knowledge, 100% true and accurate what I'm saying. The only thing that I'm altering are the real names of the individuals concerned, for obvious reasons. Now, the woman who moved in to the flat above mine, I'm going to call her Jessica. So Jessica moved in, and she was quite noisy, and I did raise a concern about the noise and to the housing officer, and it turned out that Jessica had an exercise bike which she sort of used, sometimes, it could be quite late at night, past 10 p.m., which obviously to me was a noise disturbance. And on inquiring, the housing officer found out that she had the exercise bike, and the problem was she had no carpets. She was a single woman, she couldn't afford carpets for her flat. Now, at some point during her tenancy, her boyfriend moved in as her lodger. The boyfriend for this story, this true story, I'm going to call Tom. Now, it became very apparent very early that Tom was a drug dealer. The reason you know that is when he moved into the flats, people started coming around at all hours, and when I mean all hours, midnight, 2 a.m, 3 a.m, 5 a.m, all hours they would come round. So they were his customers basically. And what would happen is at Charlton House, in my block and the other block, they have a comm system outside the doors. So you press a button, flats 1 to 16, and I believe there's a trades button as well. So on several occasions they would ring my button at maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, for example. That happened. 11 o'clock at night, 3:30 in the morning, they would ring because they had rang the Jessica and Tom's number and not got a response. And obviously they were desperate to get their drugs. And also the telling factor for me was the proof was that my bedroom, if you had a piece of string from my bedroom and put it onto the comm system, the string would be no longer than about 10 feet long. So therefore, middle of the night, everything's silence, a visitor appears, and you can hear everything that's said through the comm system. And when you hear the slang terms they use for drugs, such as cannabis and purple haze and stuff like that, what we're there for. And you also know, as I say, they're not coming around at 2 o'clock in the morning for a cup of tea and to talk about politics. So it was obvious what was going on. And confirmation, if I needed any after that, was that at some point, I'm going to say after 2 years, so we're talking around 2012, estimated, a tragedy struck. One day, Jessica, the occupant of a flat, was found unresponsive, I presume by Tom, her lodger / boyfriend, and she was dead, basically. A post-mortem later revealed she died of I believe it was a heroin overdose in her bed. So she was a drug addict. She died of a heroin overdose. So that's fact. That was in the press and everything. The post-mortem, etc. So in my wisdom, Sanctuary Housing, these charlatans, these cowboys, these disgraceful housing association, in my opinion, they decided to give the tenancy Don't forget it's a single tenancy, a 1-bedroom flat, to her lodger, Tom. Now, many people may think that is okay, that's fair enough, Yeah, he has to live somewhere. Everything is, as far as I'm aware, quite legal, above board. Yes, my tenancy agreement says I can take in a lodger. So that's not the problem, the issue. The issue I had with that was the fact that prior to my moving in, so I moved in, so this is 2012, I moved in 2008. Prior to me moving in May 2008, Tom, the drug dealer, and up to now the lodger of Jessica, was himself a tenant, an outright tenant at Charlton House, and he was evicted prior to my arrival at some point. It could have been 6 months, could have been 6 years, I don't know. At some point he was evicted through his drug dealing activities. I know this to be the case because some of the neighbours, the neighbours who've been here at that time, remember it well, that he was evicted. And I actually one day approached Tom and asked him, I said something like, I hear you were here before, and he told me he was evicted through rent arrears, non-payment of rent. So it was one of the two, rent arrears or drug dealing. I believe it was drug dealing, but he says otherwise. But moving on, so he's been evicted, we know that. He's admitted himself to me he'd been evicted once. So what the hell is this cowboy organisation Sanctuary allowing him a tenancy for a second time, having already been evicted due to non-payment of rent and drug dealing? Doesn't make sense, does it? So the drug dealing continues. It gets worse and worse and worse. And it goes on for year after year after year. So at some point, so we're at 2012 when Jessica has sadly died of the overdose. Tom is given, the drug dealer, Tom, is given the outright tenancy. Within a space, I'm going to say 12 months, could have been 6, could have been 2 years, I don't know. But I want to say 12 months for this. But it definitely happened. At some point, Tom, the drug dealer, now the tenant of the flat, had his new girlfriend move in. And I'm going to call his new girlfriend, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to call her Julie. Julie moved in. Now, over a few years, I became very friendly with Julie. Julie was a very awful, tragic story she had to tell. Julie was around 40 years old, and she was born a heroin addict, or cocaine addict, or both. She was born a drug addict. Her mum was a drug addict. She, at one time, was married. I mean, I never knew her prior to her coming to Charlton House. She told me this herself. She was married. She had 4 children. I don't know whether the 4 children were part of a marriage, whether they had the same father. I mean, that's irrelevant. But I know she had 4 children, and I know that she struggled with drugs and alcohol most of her life, and that all 4 children were taken away from her and placed into care. She told me that herself, so I've no reason to believe that to be untrue. So one day, I'm going to say 2014, I believe it was, there was an incident, a major incident at Charlton House. And I do remember definitely 100% it was on a Thursday evening, and it was just before 8:15 when I was watching a film on YouTube, and I suddenly heard a woman screaming, "Help me, help me." So, me being the type of person I am, I immediately got up, ran to my front door, opened the front door, and went out to see what was hell was going on. And what I witnessed is truly, utterly shocking. I witnessed, don't forget, Tom, the drug dealer, and Julie, they're living on the floor above mine. So you got a ground floor, I'm on the first floor, they're on the second floor. So obviously there's no lifts, so between the second floor and the third floor, there are concrete communal stairs. So what I witness is Tom, the drug dealer, dragging Julie down these concrete steps. Julie is on her back and she's being pulled down the steps by her hair. Yes, by her hair. I then had to physically go and separate the pair. And that was obviously put myself at substantial risk. I didn't know. All I know is obviously we have a drug dealer, we have a drug addict, and I didn't know whether there were weapons. My safety was put at serious risk. But I had no choice, and to be honest, if that happened again, I would act exactly in the same way. So I then asked Julie to come into my flat whilst I called the police. Julie refused. I then returned to my flat, closed the door obviously, and I dialed 999. I spoke to the police call handler, and they said, whatever you do, first of all, well, where is Julie? I explained she's still out with her boyfriend, the drug dealer. I don't know what's happening. Police officer of the person on the telephone told me on no account was I to leave my flat until the police arrive. There are 5 blue lights on the way. 5 blue lights, he said to me. So the conversation ended. I'm waiting for the police to arrive. 15 minutes passed by. Nothing. I then start hearing for a second time, help me, again. I then had a choice, either go out, risk my own health and safety, potential injury, or ring the police again. I rang 999 and I said that to the call handler, this was at 8:31. I said to the call handler that I was not prepared to sit here while the police did nothing. 15 minutes on a 999 call. Someone's life is in danger. I said I was going to arm myself with the largest knife I had in my kitchen. I was going to take that out and I will do what I have to do to protect this poor woman. Luckily, at that point, a police car arrived with one officer. I actually knew the officer, a PC Ray Fachney, and he quickly arrested Tom, the drug dealer, handcuffed him, pepper sprayed him, handcuffed him, and took him away to a police van. A second lone police officer arrived in a police car, and I explained to him what I witnessed, what I observed, what had happened. The first thing, obviously, he checked on the state of Julie. Now Julie's face was a right mess. Her right eye was completely shut. She'd obviously suffered a severe beating to her face, and there were cuts and bruises, not sufficient to need stitches, but her right eye was almost completely shut. And I can remember saying to her she's going to have a shiner, a right shiner in the morning. And on the staircase, so the communal staircase between my level, the level above, were thousands and thousands of photographs. Yes, photographs. And Judy was showing me a few. Some of them were of her as an infant, as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old girl, little girl. And they've obviously had a row. It's a domestic incident. They've had a row, and he's kicking her out. Basically, that's obviously what's happening. Whilst her boyfriend was being arrested, Julie was hysterical. Not for the fact that, she'd been beaten to a pulp almost, but the fact that her boyfriend was being arrested. No, please don't arrest Tom, the drug dealer. He's a good man, he's just not been very well. That I'll never understand. I know it's very common in domestic abuse situations, with both men and women. Yes, men are a victim as well of domestic abuse as well as women. Why, after an act of physical violence by their partner against them, most people return to the same situation, the same partner, after a few days or a few weeks, whatever. I'll never understand that, because it's only going to happen again and again. But what I did was, I went into my flats, I got 2 black bin liners, and I took them outside, and me and the police officer and Julie picked up all the paraphernalia, which were mostly photographs, and placed them in the 2 black bags. Julie didn't want to know, didn't want to have anything to do with the police, and she just left the scene. Didn't know where she went at the time, she just left the scene. I later found out she went to stay with a friend in a nearby town, which was obviously good. Now, before she left, Julie showed me and the police officer her back, and I can only imagine that the pair of them, Tom the drug dealer and Julie, were so out of it, drink and drugs I guess, that all I can imagine is that it was a mixture of maybe adrenaline, maybe with substances that had dulled the pain, because that poor girl, Julie, must have been in absolute agony. So once the situation had been sorted, she had done a runner, her boyfriend had been arrested, was taken into police custody. The remaining police officer, there were no 5 blue lights, just the 2 officers. When I said what the hell kept you, the nearest officer was away in a small village called Bishop Stainton, which is probably 6-7 miles away, and I find it unbelievable that there was no police unit, within Dawlish, Timber, which between them have probably got over 10,000 houses in the 2 towns combined, in the outer area. But to think there was no officers available at 8:15 in the evening, I find that hard to believe, but that's a different story. So what happened next was, the police officer said, would I be prepared to make a statement? And I replied, well, what's the point? Julie will say she fell over, banged her head, against something or other. She slipped and fell. She ain't gonna grass up her boyfriend. She was hysterical, but he was arrested. I said, so. And the officer responded, well, with my visual evidence, seen her being dragged by the hair backwards down the concrete steps, and by his evidence, seeing the state of her face, that would be enough to convict this thug, this drug dealer, Tom, my boyfriend. So I made a police statement. So the following day, after I made my statement, the police officer disappeared. And the following morning, it's very early, about 7:30 in the morning, I received a telephone call from Devon and Cornwall Police, and it was a female officer, a custody officer, at Torquay Police Station on a Friday, as I say. And she said at some point, once he had sobered up, Tom would be released, and as he lived here, he would be released back to Charlton House. And he was under strict bail conditions, that he was not to contact me directly or indirectly. Now, I had a choice, because I knew it was a serious situation, and I knew that my statement could have severe repercussions for myself, which I'll explain in a moment. So I had a choice to go and stay with my parents in a nearby town. I could go and stay with my sister, who lives about 100 miles away, up country. Or I could stay put where I am. And I chose to stay put where I am because the custody sergeant said to me that the police would, over the weekend, say this is Friday morning, over the weekend, would periodically make welfare checks on me to make sure I'm okay and there's no hassle, no problems from Tom or any of his friends. So, on that reassurance alone, I decided to stay put. And why should I be forced out of my own home? That's what I did. So, he was released at some point on Friday, I don't know when. All I know is, on the Friday, the Saturday, and the Sunday, I received not one single contact from Devon and Cornwall Police. I mean, I wasn't expecting someone to knock on my door every 5 minutes to check I'm okay. I wasn't even expecting anyone to come round to lock a flats to check I'm okay. But I think an officer of Devon and Cornwall Police, as I'm a witness to a vicious assault, would pick up a phone maybe 2-3 times on the Friday, the Saturday, the Sunday. 30-second call. Oh, hi Michelle, it's PC blah 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 from Devon and Cornwall Police. Everything okay? Any problems? Any hassle? No? Just give us a ring, if there's any problems, we'll ring again this evening. Something like that would have been okay. I heard nothing. Now this made me furious. And you got to understand the situation that I found myself in. You got a guy who's dealing drugs. That's fact, Tom. He's dealing drugs. And he probably has at least a dozen customers in Dawlish. So I don't know whether he's the only supplier in Dawlish. Probably not. I don't know, if there are 4 or 5 other dealers in Dawlish. But I know that on my evidence alone, because I witnessed the assault, this man, according to the custody sergeant who told me, he was looking at 6 months because he had a string of previous convictions, some violent, all drug related. So I tried to contact the officer, the community beat manager, the PC Ray Fachney, I mentioned him before. He was a guy first on the scene who pepper sprayed and handcuffed and arrested Tom um, on the night of the incident, that Thursday night, at the end of January in 2014, I believe. Now, I'm curious, and I'm thinking, well, sod it, I'm going to withdraw my statement. I want nothing more to do with this. And the reason I did that was confirmed when one day, well, before I tell that story, I'll just add that he went to court, did Tom, the drug dealer. He had vandalised a police van. So obviously he was handcuffed and put in the back of a police van, and he vandalised that. He pled guilty to that, and he received a small fine, but he pled not guilty to the assault. So it was going to be heard at the end of May, or sometime during May. I know it sounds a hell of a lot of a gap. The incident happened, so we were talking about early February, so we're waiting 3 months for the trial, a magistrate's trial, to take place, in which I was the sole witness. So probably, I would say within a couple of weeks, I was approached on a large park called the Lawn, or the Green, Dawlish Green, a beautiful place. A river goes by the side. That's where the famous black swans, reside in Dawlish, right in the town centre. If you know Dawlish, you know the Green. And I was approached by this woman. She was a tall woman, I would say, nearly 6 foot. She's up. I guess, you can tell when someone's been a long-time user of drugs by their facial features. So I would say she was probably in her mid-30s, but she looked about 50. The reason I say that was because of I imagine the drugs had distorted, made her look a lot older. A long period of drug use that made her look a lot older. So I was approached by this woman, and she said, "Are you Michelle from Charlton House?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Why do you want to know?" And she said to me, "You're the bastard who grasped on Tom. If he goes down, you're dead meat." That's what she said to me. Now, I didn't know who she was, never seen her before, I've never seen her since. But I've got to take that seriously. Because looking at the facts, he goes down, a dozen, we'll say, addicts have lost their supplier. And so I'm thinking worst case scenario. I've got, half a drug addicts in Dawlish wanting to get me. So you've got to put into the equation the lack of help from the police, not fulfilling their promise. I made 13 attempts, yes, 13 attempts to contact the officer to withdraw my statement. Because for those of you who may have reported a crime, they give you like an information pamphlet, we'll call it, and in that pamphlet it gives you contact details of the officer who's in charge. This is this PC Ray Bachney again, and any problems, any concerns, any questions, don't hesitate to ring the number, it says. I tried on 13 occasions. I left it with community PCSOs, we call them plastic coppers, these special constables who aren't really police officers. And a couple of officers. I rang in umpteen times to the 101 non-emergency police number for him to contact me. I never received one contact. Nothing. So all I was interested in now was my safety, and it ended up where in Dawlish they had like an office, like a shop. It's now a shop. I had an office, the police did, and I went to an office, and there was a community officer in there, a PCSO in there, and I refused to leave until I could formally I said I would leave in one of two ways, and that was after I officially withdrawn my statement or in handcuffs. I waited over half an hour, and two officers from the Snabbarts eventually arrived. I didn't know what was going to happen, whether or not I was going to be arrested or um, my statement withdrawn. And we had a good chat. They were nice, two nice officers, male officers. They were nice enough. They were trying to persuade me, apologise for the cock up of everything. And But I said no, I'm not prepared to put my safety at risk. I can't trust the police. So, and in the end, I did withdraw my statement. So, in leaving the office after my withdrawing my statement, of course, when he did go to court in the May, Tom, he pleaded not guilty to the assault, and therefore the charge was withdrawn from the Crown Prosecution Service. And the tragedy of all this is that he got away with it. So the only winner in all of this was the assailant, was the thug who beat his girlfriend to a pulp. And this is what Sanctuary Housing and Devon and Cornwall Police allowed to happen. Absolutely disgusting. So, as expected, Julie, the woman who Tom assaulted, moved back, living with a drug dealing boyfriend, Tom, for a period of time. But then, I'm going to say, well, we still got all the hassle with, the drug deals going on all hours. The actual front door at Charlton House, the main communal entrance door to flats 1 to 16, it must have been broken at least once a year, and either windows smashed to smithereens to people to gain entry, the door physically kicked in, or the wooden door frame broken, whatever, but forced in. Must have been 15, 20 times they had to repair or replace broken glass or whatever, the landlord, because of these thugs coming in, the ringing doorbells of mine and others. I actually had to cut the wires of my doorbell, but that didn't stop people somehow coming in, banging on my door, looking for Tom at 2 o'clock in the morning. Absolutely a living hell. And then one day, I'll say 2019. Again, it could have been 2018 or 2017, but I'm going to say 2019. I know it was before COVID. There was news, both in the local press, on BBC Radio Devon, in the local newspapers, on Facebook, and just through general gossip, that a body had been found. And this body had been found in an underground car park, literally next door to Dawlish railway station. It was later revealed in the forthcoming days, following the discovery of this body. It was the body of a woman, around 40 years of age, and this woman had hanged herself. She committed suicide in this underground garage. And then, shortly afterwards, it came out that the poor woman was Julie, the drug dealer's girlfriend. Apparently, they had had a row. She stormed off and hung herself. So we're talking about, that's now 2 deaths. Jessica, the original occupant, and now Julie. 2 women dead. Julie was 41. Absolute disgusting. But life goes on and things go on. Drug dealing continued. There's also another couple I want to talk to you about in connection with drug use at Charlton House. Now, there was a trans woman. I didn't know, I'm obviously transgender, but I didn't know her until I moved here. It's just a coincidence, there was another trans woman living at Charlton House. She lived in the same block. Her name was Andrea. That was her real name. And she had a lodger, who I'm going to call Alice. Not her real name, obviously. Now, the reason I'm going to name Andrea will become obvious. Now, I know I became friends, obviously we have a connection of being trans, and we both worked in a care home in Dawlish, did Andrew and Alice, the lodger, we're going to call it. So, I know that they were both drug users, not sure heroin or cocaine. I think they took both. Because on numerous occasions they would, especially Alice, but sometimes Andrea, would knock on my door asking me to borrow some money, £20. It was always £20 because they had no money. They had to wait till their payday, and they wanted to buy some drugs off, yes, Tom. So, again, more evidence. And Andrea was a really nasty person. In her formal life, and what I mean by formal life is in her before she transitioned. For example, when I began my transition in 1996, so anything in my life, my school years, my early teens, my 20s, I was 32 years old in 1996 when I began my transition. So up to then, I call it my former life, my male life, as opposed to now my female life. In her former life, she's told me herself, Andrea told me this herself. She ran an antiques business in Torquay. Now, she was up to no good in her business, and I'm not sure of all the juicy details, but she told me herself that she was found guilty of theft and fraud through her antique business, and she received a 2-year suspended prison sentence. That's what she told me herself. Now, one day, Andrea at Charlton House disappeared. She vanished. Just cleared off, gone. And Alice was unaware. She didn't know. She came back from work. Most of the stuff, obviously, Alice was the tenant, was the lodger. So most of the stuff, the fridge freezer, the television, the cooker, etc., that belonged to Andrea. And she had buggered off to go to stay with her mother's in South Wales, somewhere in South Wales. So Alice, the tenant, Alice the lodger, was left at the property. Within days, lots of post came, and Alice opened some of the mail, and one article was from the court, the county court, and it was a date of an eviction notice. Another letter said that Andrea hadn't paid her rent for months, and she actually owed Sanctuary Housing over £2,500 in unpaid rent and court costs. Alice, the lodger, she showed me the letters, so I've seen the letters myself, and she also showed me, which I think is deplorable, she showed me a rent book. Yeah, she had a rent book, because Alice was paying Andrea £50 a week, housekeeping if you like, to lodge with her. And good as I guess Andrea was spending it on drugs or whatever, I haven't got a clue what she's spending on. And to show what charlatans, I'm going to use the word, what bastards these people are at Sanctuary. They refused. Alice offered to take over the tenancy, to pay back the arrears in instalments for £2,500 if she could stay. Sanctuary said no, and Alice was evicted, made homeless. I know this is true, 100%, because as Alice, on the night before the eviction, Alice knocked on my door and asked she didn't have many possessions, but asked if I could store in my flat what possessions she had. Of course I agreed. And Alice was sofa surfing then. There came a short time after Alice was evicted, that I became aware. After she dropped off her stuff, I never saw Alice again. But I became aware that she had lost her job because of her drug addiction at the care home, and she was homeless, destitute, no money, homeless. That's how callous Sanctuary Housing are. This poor woman. I didn't know where she was, whether she was even in Dawlish. That's all I knew. And then one day, more news started circulating around Dawlish, and indeed was in the local press, the BBC and ITV and the local newspapers, of a dog walker taking his dog for a walk on the beach in Dawlish, and he came across an area where they have rocks, and on the rocks he found a dead body, a body of a woman, her head smashed to pieces on the rocks. It was obvious this woman had fallen from the cliff top above, I don't know, 100 foot, we'll say 100 foot, had fallen to her death. Nobody will know whether Alice accidentally fell, what the circumstances were, but whether it was suicide, whether it was accidental, no one will know. So, we now have Jessica, the original tenant of Flat 9 after the gay couple that moved out. We have Julie, the mother of 4 children, who committed suicide. And now we have Alice. 3 women dead. all connected to Tom, the drug dealer. All drug addicts, all supplied by Tom, the drug dealer. So what happens? Life goes on. Life continues. He's still dealing drugs. I and others complained repeatedly to Sanctuary Housing. They did nothing. We repeatedly complained to Devon and Cornwall Police. Likewise, they did nothing. And then, one day, I became aware of a court case. And I did a bit of investigation into this court case, read the court papers, and what happened was, in 2022, Merseyside Police, it was the beginning of 2022, Merseyside Police launched a large investigation into drugs, county lines drugs, of a gang based in Liverpool, in Merseyside. That investigation, which took 18 months in total, led to Merseyside Police. The trail led to Devon and Cornwall. In, I believe it was the end of 2022, so December 2022, all the assailants, I believe there was 26 of them, I believe in total, from Liverpool and from Devon, were arrested and charged with possession with intent to supply Class A drugs. And the trial took place in June to August. It's a long trial, obviously. All 26 people weren't tried at the same time, in batches. And Tom was involved. And Tom, in June of 2023, he actually pled not guilty. But he was found guilty by a jury, one of the 26, and sentence was deferred until the rest of the people were dealt with by the court, i.e. the trials, guilty, not guilty pleas. It was then so that was in the summer, the June, at Exeter Crown Court. In November, I believe it was November 24th, 2023, it came for sentencing for Tom. Tom, I don't know why, he was the 26th person to be convicted and to be sentenced. And it's a matter of court record. I know because I looked up the court record. It was also reported widely in the press. I believe it was £1.3 million worth of drugs were involved. And it was revealed that Tom had been under surveillance for 18 months. And they had telephone records. They had photos of him picking up drugs nearby, stuffed in a hedge or, wherever. So we had enough evidence for a conviction to prove he was involved. Now, the judge, in her summing up, said that she was considering a community rehabilitation order, which I think was disgraceful. But while he was on bail, so after being found guilty, and he was on bail pending his sentencing on the 24th of November, he had to attend probation for reports to be done prior to sentencing. And on 2 separate occasions, just what the judge said in her summing up, it's in the court records, that Tom was so drugged up that he fell asleep during for probation meetings on 2 occasions. The judge therefore sentenced Tom to 3 years imprisonment. So he was sentenced to prison for 3 years. That's what he received. So I'm going to end. There's more to the story, but we're approaching the hour, so it's dragged on. I said it would. There's more to the story, about 10 more minutes worth, which I'm going to make in a separate video. Part 4 will be that video, and to explain unbelievably what happened after the sentencing of Tom the drug dealer. So I want to thank everyone once again for watching this video. I know it's nearly an hour long, and please again feel free to leave comments in the comment section down below. I know, as I say, please understand the names have been changed, or by Andrews, for my own safety, and obviously for the poor 3 women who are dead. Jessica, not real name. Julie, not real name. And Anne, who was not Anne, Alice. Sorry, Alice, who was found at the bottom of the cliffs on the rocks. So 3 people were dead, but there's worse to follow in part 4. So, as I say, I apologise for poor quality of the video, but it's the story I think is important to get across to the corruptness of sanctuary housing and Devon and Cornwall Police. So again, I want to thank you for watching this video.